Hi there. This is a quick update on examining the filming schedule and release date for House of the Dragon Season 2. By considering not just that the actors have said that filming will begin in March, but cross-referencing that with Emmy politics. Because even though we don't care about those, we know that Emmy nominations are not the ratings boost that they used to be even 10 years ago. HBO still thinks that they are. And we have seen that this will influence how they plan out their yearly schedule. That rather than have one of their big shows competing against another major Emmy contender within the same award cycle, they might delay their show so it's after the cutoff date. That might affect when House of the Dragon Season 2 comes out. So looking at this and doing all the math, this is the short version. That's what I'm racing off in this video. I'm going to put my conclusions up front. 3 major points. Point 1 is just reiterating what I already said a week ago when the news of the start date came out, that if they're starting to film in March to end filming in November, it is physically impossible for them to have a spring 2024 release. Even with no other considerations, that isn't happening. Anything saying earlier than that is clickbait. And knows that, because that's similar to the scale it took to make Season 1. It's simple math. In addition to that, now factoring in Emmy politics, point 2 is they also don't want to rush it to get out by spring 2024, because if they do, it would be in the same Emmy cycle as the juggernaut final season of The Crown. They would be competing at the Emmys that year against The Crown's final season. And there's a strong chance they don't want to do that, so it would make even more sense, reinforcing it won't be in spring, it'll be in summer. And last, third point is the only other show big enough at the Emmys that's still ongoing that could influence this is HBO's own Succession. Now, they have a bit slower of a production time than The Crown, which comes out every November. Looking at the production time for each Succession season, that Season 4 took a little longer than Season 3, it's starting to look like Succession Season 5 physically wouldn't be ready until fall of 2024. I don't think they'd need to delay it from summer. I don't think it'll be physically done until fall of 2024. And even then, HBO wouldn't want them to overlap because they own both shows, and they don't like running 2 major Sunday night dramas at the same time. So it just reinforces that they're not going to hold it off until fall. It reinforces this will be a summer release, not spring, probably not fall either. And that's what we're looking at. That took 3 minutes to explain. Now let me just show my work. First, a recap of the longer 25-minute video I did explaining production time. The big factor you need to consider out of this whole video is that the Emmy cutoff date is in late May. That it's not calendar year. Some awards like the Golden Globes go by calendar year, January 1st to December 31st of 2022, you're eligible. Emmys don't work like that. The Emmy year ends in May. And their rule is that at least half of your episodes need to be released before May 31st. That if you have a 10-episode season, episode 5 needs to air before May 31st. But if, like Andor, you have a 12-episode season, episode 6 needs to air before that. Which is why, counting back 5 Sundays, major Emmy-level shows will have their spring premiere no later than April. That April-ish is just count out 5 is the most you can do. Game of Thrones always did April. And I say April-ish, like sometimes March 30th, or rarely there's 5 Sundays in May, so maybe like May 2nd, in that case, fuzzy up to 2 days in either direction. And just last year, 2022, there were 5 Sundays in May, but barring that, it's April. That things don't premiere second week of May onwards for essentially all of May. Combined with this is that in the United States, early to mid-June is NBA basketball championship season. So they don't put anything out in June either, because they don't want to air it opposite basketball finals. Well, premiere it opposite the finals. They'll let like episode 9 and 10 of a late-running drama show get into the start of the championships, but their idea is everyone's already watching by that point. The combined result of this is that May and June are a dead zone. Nothing premieres then. Barring like May 2nd or June 30th or something. That this past year, case in point, I said the earliest that season 1 of House of the Dragon could premiere was the Sunday after the NBA Finals. The one Sunday in late June that isn't basketball was June 26th, last week of June. Now, looking at the season 1 filming date, what actually happened is they filmed April 2021 to February of 2021. That confused us for a bit, but they quickly explained we were supposed to film from April to December. The end date was December. We got delayed 2 months due to COVID spikes from Omicron last winter. So this was meant to be an April to December shoot, aiming at a summer 2022 release. Just looking at the calendar, that delayed 2 months, they had their premiere, very early fall premiere, the last weekend of August, the 8th month. Minus 2 months from that COVID delay would be the last weekend of the 6th month. That lined up with what I had predicted on the map, that the earliest they would do this, they're probably aiming for the last week of June, right after basketball finals end, which is also after, if you miss the Emmy cutoff, it's not worth being that early in the awards cycle against a sports championship. So that's roughly what we're looking at, that under the new system, under the new leadership, they're filming from spring-ish to late fall-ish, November to December, aiming for a summer, not spring release. Why am I stressing this? Because some of you might point out, Game of Thrones would film from spring to late fall and then be out by spring, wasn't it? That's what they did. Well, not exactly, because the early seasons of Game of Thrones were not on that big of a scale and did not have that much CGI for post-production. I mean, just physically, season 1 didn't have large-scale battle scenes in it. They happened off-screen, so it's not really comparable. As the scale got bigger, particularly the CGI budget, that's the post-production cycle just gets longer because of that. Even if both would finish in December, they need all that time for all the dragon CGI and stuff. And on top of that, the later seasons could not keep up that pace. That the early seasons were able to do that because they didn't have as much scale or CGI, and when the later ones did get that huge physically and with that much CGI, seasons 7 and 8 no longer kept an annual release schedule. It outgrew that. So you see, they were already growing beyond the film from spring to fall release by spring schedule. We had already grown beyond that. And there was that awkward transition phase by like seasons 5 to 6. The second half of the show was growing too big. Even season 6, there were sloppy mistakes all over the place that people just forget of. Oh, there was a big battle I liked at the end, but there were sloppy mistakes all over the place because they were rushing to pack this giant show into such a short turnaround time was very difficult, and even they had to abandon it. So just the scale of that. On top of this, a big thing that the new showrunners said, Ryan Condal, I've reported on this, he said it very prominently in his first podcast, and the directors have too, is they use the European filming model instead of the American filming model, which is really for movies, that the idea is the American movie-making film set model used in the Los Angeles movie industry is work everyone 6 days a week, over 10 hours a day, to cram it in. It's like the video game industry has the phenomenon of the crunch period, where we can get it done by the street date if we just have everyone live in the office, work 7 days a week, 18 hours a day. Then what happens if you run overtime? The entire point of having overtime is, what if there's an accident? Save bonus days for a rainy day. If something goes wrong, we'll have time that you factor in extra time in case something unanticipated happens. The American system is work them until they drop to rush it out by a certain date. And we saw what resulted from that in the later Game of Thrones seasons, that just how much it disrupted everything. When you work people to exhaustion, they're not working at as high of a quality. And they've stressed this a lot in interviews, that we switched to the European model under Ryan Condal, that it's 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, and if an accident happens, we can come in on the weekend to make up for the lost time. Overall result of this is that these people do not have the mentality of rushing it out faster than anticipated. They have embraced the idea of taking as much time as it takes to get it right. So it isn't going to be, I've seen people even saying, well, it shouldn't take that long to write because it's done and there's fewer characters. There's as many characters as you want to have. That on paper, the number of major speaking roles in season 1 is less than, it's smaller than in Game of Thrones, but it's supposed to expand. There's only fewer characters if you don't want Bela and Irena to be fully realized characters, basically. Remember the thing we had just last week with the deleted scene they released? And went, why did they cut this? Well, if you want Bela to be a character, they need more time to write and film it. If you want season 2 characters like Jane Aaron, maybe Nettles, Dayron, Alice Rivers, the Blackwoods, it takes time to make more characters, and it expands as much as you want it to. But I don't need to prove that. They've already said filming begins in March. Writing is done, or soon to be done. That we already have a target date for when filming starts. It starts in March, and is going to end in November. Which brings this around full circle that I said season 1, they started in April and intended to end in December, targeted to release the following summer in July, early July. If they're starting in March and ending in November, that just means the start and end dates have shifted only 1 month, which isn't enough to overcome the 2-month dead zone gap at the end of the spring cutoff. The Emmy cutoff combined with NBA finals, that if at the earliest, like season 1, if you're targeting for last week of June, and you go, but we're finishing a month earlier, well, 1 month earlier from late June is late May, well beyond the Emmy cutoff. They would not premiere something then. So I've been saying this for weeks and months. Maybe if they started filming the interior scenes, because it's winter now, if they really wanted to get it out in spring, if they started filming the interior stuff in January, they might have been able to meet spring of 2024. That's just not happening with a March release. But I've said all that already. My other video, it took me 25 minutes to say that. Let me see here. It took me 10 minutes to reiterate that, of why physically this could not come out in spring of 2024. Now we get on to the Emmy politics. That this is sort of an advanced preview of a longer video I'm working on because of all the Golden Globe and Critics' Choice Awards nominations House of the Dragon got, which are going to be coming up in mid-January. So I'm working on a tie-in video for that. Because I realized we're coming up on another big retirement wave of major awards-level shows, that a lot of big shows are going to be ending in the next year or two, or have already ended. And I was thinking, not in the scale of the next year, but the next 5 to 6 years. What are going to be the major series that House of the Dragon is competing with, on the awards circuit? That looking back, that there's different, it doesn't go smoothly, that there's different eras where the Emmys are dominated by different shows. In the 2000s, it was The Sopranos. After the late 2000s writers' strike, it was from late 2000s strike to about 2014, it was the Breaking Bad Mad Men era, where they dominated most of the awards. After that, it was the late Game of Thrones from 2015 to 2019, because they just latched on to those seasons, which weren't even that good, because after Breaking Bad ended, what are we going to talk about now? That the hype news needed something to geek out over and shower them with awards that they didn't deserve. They even gutted the Emmy voting standards. I've talked about this. They got rid of the blue ribbon panels in 2015. But one way or another, Game of Thrones was so big that 2019, Season 8 at the Emmy Awards was considered so big that a lot of studios didn't put out their shows the same year, so they didn't get overshadowed. Case in point, like Handmaid's Tale didn't rush out to get their show in the same awards cycle as Game of Thrones Season 8. Everyone thought it would sweep the awards, and were surprised when the season was that bad, that no one, because you plan it out 2 years in advance, that when you're making a show, no one thought it would be like that. And they go, oh, well, we won Best Thing. That was like a proxy vote for the whole show, and it didn't really get they thought it would sweep all of the acting categories, the writing and directing categories, and when it didn't, you could see the shock on their faces. Benioff and Weiss at that they realized this isn't going to be the triumphant night that we sweep the awards and it boosts us into launching our Star Wars movie career, that didn't fit the narrative they had made for themselves. But one way or another, the Game of Thrones era ended. So the question is, what has been dominating the Emmy Awards since 2019? I sat down and crunched the numbers. I'm not going to spend time going through this now. I'll do it in the bigger video. But going by raw number of nominations, because rarely, an outsider can win once, but a more general total nominations for the major categories, which are all the acting categories for drama, best series drama, best writing drama, and best directing drama. If you add up number of nominations for the past 3 years, half a dozen shows have gotten over half of all of the major Emmy nominations. This is what's dominating the field right now. The Crown, Succession, Better Call Saul, Ozark, Handmaid's Tale, most earlier in its run, but still some acting things, and Apple TV's The Morning Show. 5 out of 6 of these have either ended or they're going to end. That within this cycle, we had the second to last seasons of The Crown and Succession. Ozark ended early enough in the year they won't be at the next Emmy Awards. Better Call Saul will, because they split their final season, so Season 6B will be at the next Emmy Awards. So in terms of stuff that was released in this Emmy cycle, House of the Dragon Season 1 will be competing against Better Call Saul, which actually finished in August right before they premiered, because it goes from July 2022 to next May of 2023 is this Emmy cycle. Things in that chronologically are Better Call Saul, then House of the Dragon, then later by November came The Crown and Handmaid's Tale for a couple of acting things, and not even released yet is Succession Season 4. Just against the final season of Better Call Saul. We're not going to win anything in Season 1, and that's not shameful. It may be a split vote thing, and it doesn't really matter anyway. No one expects them to clear out at the Emmys after their first season. Even Game of Thrones didn't. But, they might get a lucky break there, you never know. So it's not really about Season 1, it's about Season 2, because by then, no more Better Call Saul or Handmaid's Tale. And most importantly, the two big dogs here are The Crown and Succession will have their gigantic final seasons, which will get this huge proxy vote at the Emmy Awards as an approval for the entire run of the show. HBO probably doesn't want the next season of House of the Dragon to overlap with those. So, when are those two happening? Well, The Crown actually comes out very consistently on a strict annual basis every 12 months, every November. Even when they took a year off for the pandemic, when they came back, it was right back to coming out like clockwork every November. So we can safely predict that The Crown Season 6, the final season, the huge final season that'll dominate the Emmys, will be released November 2023, putting it in the same Emmy cycle that begins July 2023 and ends May 2024. May 2024. Anything coming out spring of 2024 will be in the same cycle as a November show like The Crown's final season. It's before the cutoff, so House of the Dragon Season 2 wouldn't want to rush out to come out by spring in order to face the heavy Emmy competition of The Crown's final season. No one wants that. Matt Smith would lose to Jonathan Pryce as Prince Philip at their Emmy Awards. They don't want to go head-to-head with The Crown's final season. And I already said, from a production standpoint alone, they're probably not going to come out by spring because they weren't aiming for a spring release with Season 1 with a similar production time. They were aiming for summer. On top of this, there is no impetus, there is no drive to rush to face The Crown. They don't want to do that. But then what about Succession? They said Succession Season 5 will be the final season. That's a little more complicated because they have been taking slightly longer than a year to come out with every season. The general rule of thumb has been that a new Succession season will come out the subsequent year, but it'll premiere the same month that the prior season had its finale. So like Season 1 was June 2018 to August 2018. August was the finale of Season 1, but then Season 2 in 2019, the premiere was in August, and then it ran to October. And again, the pandemic didn't even disrupt this, that when they started up again, Season 3 then premiered in October of 21, the same month that Season 2 had finished in 2019. So, you see, every season they shifted 2 months later in the year. So they didn't take a full year off, but just it shifted 2 months later each time to the new season. It started as a summer show, went to a fall show. Season 4 is running a little later, though, because based on that logic of, okay, Season 3 ended in December, it should begin the next season in the subsequent December, or January at least. That's not what's happening this time. That instead, the winter schedule show is The Last of Us on HBO. And we think Season 4 is going to premiere in March, because they said it's a spring release, so March, maybe April, but let's say March. So they're not speeding up or even staying consistent, it's getting slightly longer. Well, let's extend out that pattern, that this is going to be 2023 for Season 4. 2024, if they start in March, they're going to end in May of 23. Which we could expect Season 5 to premiere in May, but nothing premieres in May because of the Emmy cutoff. So it's already, and the fact that they're also running 2 months later than last season, that instead of 14 months, it took 16 months. We can pretty much safely say that Succession would be in time for summer release. That raises its own complications of now you have House of the Dragon overlapping with Succession, but HBO owns both shows, and HBO is not in the habit of overlapping their own shows together. This doesn't have Emmy considerations anymore, because whether it's in summer or fall, that's the next Emmy cycle, after The Crown ends. But still, how is HBO going to work out their internal schedule? HBO doesn't like to double up their major dramas on Sunday night. Rare exceptions, but usually it's the one big Sunday night drama spot, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And they space out their content. Given that Succession has been taking longer to make each year, that Season 4 took longer to make than Season 3, and a big final season, the writers have enough clout that they would take their sweet time to have extra writing time to get it perfect, because you're building to this really complicated, amazing climax. I'm inclined to think that Succession will be closer to a fall release, or at least late summer, August, or fall release. Because if you think about it, you just look at the pattern in this cycle. House of the Dragon came out in August, September, and Succession Season 4 is coming out in spring. It's got a 6-month lead on Succession. So it stands to reason the House of the Dragon would probably be done first, despite the fact that it's a large-scale show with a lot of action scenes and special effects, and Succession isn't. But Succession takes a lot of time to write and get all the camera work right. It's different kind of complexity. But just looking at the numbers and the dates here, I'm not as worried because it's another HBO show. HBO is in control of this. So I don't think they would delay House of the Dragon to fall to put Succession out first. That doesn't make sense. They'd have to rush it. But it just reinforces to me that we are looking at a summer 2024 release for House of the Dragon, early July. Like I'll say July 4th weekend, and that could mean last weekend in June, depending on how the calendar falls. That's what we're looking at here. Anything saying, well, it needs to come out in spring. Why? Take the time to get it right. I don't mind having a really long break between seasons. There'll be other content that we can go over. I hope they put out animated stuff, but no one was paying attention to this show and didn't do any background research. And like, we need character profiles, not just on Rhaenyra and Alicent, but on Daeron or Bela, who's kind of been an ignored character, or Jane Arryn, or Aemon. That Helena, that there weren't character profiles for like, people weren't paying attention to this. In-depth character analysis, that this is the mentality of late Game of Thrones by like season 7, where it was, I want to be making clickbait about theories of this shocking thing that'll happen. It's a finished book. We know who dies. You can't sustain yourself on wild theories. What you have to do is analysis and character profiles. Some speculation on, well, how will they adapt that from a thing we already know. I've seen more than one clickbait channel, the Raven thing, that just, there is, please stop. You're taking advantage of people. That we are going, and this show will always be like this, with 1.5 year breaks between seasons to get higher quality, and you have to adapt to, we're going to have to wait. Now, there's a separate video I'm working on of just, given that all these shows are ending, that the 6 shows that dominated the Emmys since Game of Thrones, only the morning show will be left. After the end of The Crown and Succession, what are the big shows? Like Severance, Yellow Jacket? That's a whole other thing we're going to put out, tied in with the Golden Globes, of what are the rivals considered for this, and this might affect scheduling. But you see, all I did is I took straightforward comments the cast made about we're filming March to November, cross-referenced that with how long it took to make season 1, minus the fact, and if anything, if you didn't consider that there was a COVID delay, you would think it would take even later to come out than I'm saying. I'm saying, no, that was a COVID delay. It won't come out in fall, but it'll come out in summer. Considering that no one wants to go out against The Crown's final season, it'll be like Game of Thrones' final season when people held off into the next Emmy cycle. But you just have to remember the cycle begins and ends late May. So please stick around for all the other content. I have a whole list of stuff for schedule videos to tie in with New Year's Eve, and this will explain what we're going to be doing through 2023.